Welcome to Insight to Impact, Udemy's thought leadership series for learning leaders and professionals. Over the course of this year, we'll be meeting with global leaders and luminaries to discuss lessons learned and the future of the industry, and we're very excited to have you along with us for the journey. Hi there, my name is Caoimhe Carlos and I'm the Global Vice President of Customer Success at Udemy, and I'm very excited to be here today for our Insight to Impact conversation with none other than Brenda Sugrue. Brenda, can you tell our watchers a little bit about yourself?
Hi, Caoimhe, and thank you for having me today. Well, I've been in the field of learning for too many years to count now. It's going on decades. I've been a professor, an innovator, a researcher, and more recently, probably for the past 15 years, a corporate learning leader. I spent the last 10 years as the Global Chief Learning Officer at EY, and I retired from that position about 6 months ago. I now work as an independent industry advisor, and I'm also enjoying having time to do some writing and teaching, and it's great to be with you today.
Before we get into the meat of our conversation today, we want to give everybody an opportunity to get to know you a little bit better. So we've got some quick fire questions that I'm going to put your way, and I'm hoping that you could answer them without giving them too much thought. So we'll start with, are you a tea or a coffee person?
Coffee, even though I'm Irish, I love coffee.
Are you a dog or a cat person?
Dogs, because we have dogs in the family.
I love it. You can't beat a pet dog. Do you books or movies?
That's a tough one, but I have to say books, I think, overall.
What about your any kind of recommendations or books you've recently read that you've loved?
Well, I love Irish authors, and I just read Sally Rooney's Intermezzo, which I enjoyed.
Would you rather be too hot or too cold?
Too cold.
Too cold. I mean, explains the move back to Ireland from sunny California. And then, last but not least, would you rather visit the past or visit the future?
Definitely the future. I mean, it's so exciting to not know what's going to happen and to get up every day, looking forward to new things. So definitely the future.
The focus of our conversation today is going to be on better learning with science and AI. And so, Brenda, can you tell everybody why this topic in particular resonates with you?
And I guess this is almost like the past meeting the future in a really good way. I've been a student and an evangelist of learning science for my whole career and tried to apply it at scale to build more effective and impactful learning. For example, making sure that learning programs don't just have a lot of information, but also have the practice that learners need to build real usable skills. And also so that learners don't waste time on content that they already know. So I think AI is making it much easier for us to design and deliver better learning at scale.
Can you tell us a little bit about, Brenda, where you've seen meaningful impact through applying learning science?
Researchers at Carnegie Mellon University have been studying this for decades, and they consistently find that learning that is mostly practice and feedback leads to twice the learning in half the time. They call it the doer effect. They estimate that if we could layer on top of that some more effective instructional strategies such as self-explanation and motivational support, and really use AI tutoring to personalize the learning, we could actually get to 10 times better learning. Now, that would be phenomenal.
Amazing.
I've seen the double effect myself many times when we've done transformations of big learning programs like leadership programs or sales learning. We have managed to double the impact on sales, on business outcomes, on retention, and even on college grades when we've tackled online university courses. So I've also seen reductions in time to learn when we reduce the amount of lecture and all of the content is really focused on very clear, practical learning objectives.
I love that. And so I think it's so interesting when you talk about, it's not just information and information exchange that makes learning effective. It's really about how you embed the learning and how you make it easy for learners to recall that learning down the line. So can you speak a little to, in a corporate context, when you've rolled out programs like this, what types of components you've built into the programs to kind of make sure that they're incredibly effective.
Well, I think there's a little trick to when you're designing these programs, which is we call it backwards design. So
Mhm.
once you're clear about what you want learners to be able to do and not think or say, but to do, then designing the practice and assessment activities first
Mhm.
makes you focus on those. And then everything else that you're going to build in to prepare them for the practice and to be successful follows from that. Um, We've used all kinds of scenario-based practice, team-based challenges, simulations online and in the classroom. So things like even flipped classroom, which became a big idea maybe 10 years ago. We've done that too, where we use the valuable in-person or classroom time for practice, not for lecture.
Love that. And I think there's a lot of opportunity and potential here, and we know that it works. So how far do you think we are from kind of getting to this place of the doer effect and increasing the effectiveness of our learning at scale in the real world today?
I think we're getting very close. I remember back in the 1990s and 2000s, Roger Schank was up at every conference, pounding the podium, saying, people learn by doing, and we've got to give them simulations and practice. And we're so far beyond that now. Sound instructional practices have really become the norm. It's now accepted that active learning is effective learning, not passive learning. And there are more and more easy and affordable tools that we can use to develop the simulation-based practice, not just for technical skills, but
Mhm.
also for the non-technical, more interpersonal, softer skills as well. I think AI is making it possible to really deliver realistic role plays at scale. And then, of course, generative AI can generate
Mhm.
thousands of questions and scenario-based practice questions once you feed it the content or the expertise in some format, even job documentation. So that is really helping us as well. We also, when we can generate those test and practice questions, we can use the test questions to gauge what people know already and then tailor the segments of the learning that they're being presented to the knowledge gaps that they have. So this is all really starting to become a reality.
Yeah, it's amazing the efficiency gains, the personalization, and just the level of immersion and experience that we're capable of building into learning at scale through technology is it's really exciting to kind of see where it goes. Now, Brenda, I know that you are an optimist by nature, and it sounds like you're very optimistic about the future of learning. Are there any concerns that you have in terms of how the industry is progressing?
Caoimhe, I used to be quite a purist, I would say, about
Mm.
instructional design and controlling the learning experience. And I've come to the realization that speed and flexibility are more important than precision when skill gaps and needs are so great and so fast changing. I've also learned, particularly from skills management systems, that AI powered systems really get better with time and use. So I'm actually much more comfortable now to let definitions and estimates of skills emerge from multiple sources of data that the technology and the AI can pull together. So, and also, of course, the prevalence of really high quality learning is very encouraging. So my concerns have more to do with, I think, stakeholder, regulator, and even learner expectations than about the quality of the learning itself and our ability to deliver it.
Yeah, that's I think you've just hit the nail on the head there with where at least from our side we sometimes see some of the bigger challenges. It's not on the content of the learning or the experience of the learning. It's actually how as humans we engage with the ecosystem that's available and our expectations of it. So can you speak more around those expectations and kind of how as an industry we can think about addressing them?
Well, I think business leaders and regulators often cling to old models of learning, and they're baked into the way we collect data, the way we approve and approve maybe learning for different purposes. I think if we take the example of the pandemic, when we switched to online learning and nobody had a problem with that, and we were able to show that it was just as effective, even more popular. I think people started doing more learning and also much more efficient and less expensive. So leaders had no problem with that. But then when we went back to in-person meetings again, I think there was a feeling, and there still is, that we should be doing learning in person and that it's better in person. So we need to educate and continue to educate against that perception. Then I think when it comes to personalized learning, how do we get business leaders and regulators to understand and accept that not every learner has to go through everything to be certified? Different learners will have different paths, and as long as we can demonstrate and validate that they have the skill, then it doesn't really matter. How will we start? How will we feel when the average learning hours start to go down instead of up, and yet skill levels are going up? I think we have to switch our focus from the learning hour, the time spent learning, to the actual skill acquisition and validation of those skills.
Yeah, it's so important that we have robust ways to measure, impact like that, because, like you say, as the technology improves and as we can gain better effectiveness in a more efficient way, then hours may not necessarily be the right metric to continue to track. So you've talked a little bit kind of about at the organization or the kind of stakeholder level. What about at the learner level? What about the expectations of employees and learners themselves? Do you think that they're going to embrace these kind of new ways of learning that are starting to emerge?
Well, first of all, I do think they will, but sometimes learners are not really good judges about what they need to build expertise. They can
Mhm.
be tricked into an illusion of learning if they have a nice, entertaining lecture, a really good instructor. And they can sometimes resent having to invest so much mental effort in scenario based practice and repeated practice. They can get frustrated if they're failing assessments. And they might even find it difficult to focus their attention on learning if it's interjected in the flow of work rather than presented in a separate, dedicated place and time. So I think we need to educate learners about how their brains work, how they build expertise, both during formal learning and on the job, and really the role of deliberate practice and their own focus on that to build their expertise. I think we need to give them accurate assessments of their knowledge so that they don't have illusions and so that they can see when they're making progress as well. And I think certifications are really helpful with that as well. They can work and work, and then they get a credential, and then they feel they've achieved a lot. I think too, we have, and this has always been the case, that most learning happens on the job. But if we could
Mhm.
see every work task as an opportunity for more practice and improvement, and if we could align all the performance support and the job aids with what's happening in the learning as well, then learners can more clearly see the connection between learning and their everyday performance.
Yeah, I love that. And I love your framing of learning in the context of gaining expertise, because I think that positioning is really compelling for learners, particularly in a corporate context, and it isn't always necessarily spoken about in that way. Now, you also hit on something that I think is interesting there, which is learning in the flow of work, and this is something that I think a lot of organizations and leaders are trying to figure out how to weave into their strategy and their learning programs. I'm curious what your take is on the role of AI as a co-pilot for work tasks. Do you think that having AI agents and assistants will ultimately change what employees do or don't need to learn?
Well, it will, in the sense that as work itself gets
Mhm.
redefined and distributed between humans and machines, then the training of the humans will have to change to reflect the new business processes and the new tasks that the employees are doing. However, I think it's going to be even more important that humans continue to retain control and deep knowledge of their fields and not give that over to the agents. We as humans are going to need to be even more expert so that we can design and use and critique the work of those agents. For example, medical doctors are still going to need to understand how the body works and how to treat patients, and also how to use the output of AI diagnostic systems. Cybersecurity professionals are still going to need to understand the threats and how to prevent them. And I think going back to the science of expertise, and I always refer people to the work of Anders Ericsson, who really studied how experts become expert. And humans are still going to need both the automated expertise that makes it seem like they're just making decisions so fast, the thinking fast, and also be able to switch to the more slow thinking when there are new problems, complex problems, and you need to really reason through logic and understanding key concepts and principles in a field such as medicine, for example.
Yeah, I love that because it's not just about, decision making with information. It's about ability to think critically and make the best decision in certain scenarios as well. And that is something that's going to continue to be absolutely, paramount for humans. Now, Brenda, we've talked a lot about effective learning and what that looks like and how that might change as we progress in the future. What we haven't really talked a lot about is what people should be learning and what skills organizations need to be training on in the first place. And so I have a question for you around how you think about connecting skills and training investment to the strategy and goals of a business.
Well, that's a great point, Caoimhe, because knowing what to train is as important as how to train it efficiently and effectively. I think we do know now a lot more about how to train, but the question is, what should we be training? What skills should we be focused on? What skills should a corporation be investing in for now and the future? And in a way, training that's not aligned with the business needs or even the needs of the labor market in general, it's a waste of time to begin with, even though people might enjoy learning about basket weaving, for example. That is not a skill that's in demand or going to be in demand. So in corporations, we tend to distinguish between the skills that we need now for the jobs that people are doing and to accelerate their performance there, and then skills that are going to become more important as the business grows and transforms. And I think every business is in a big transformation state at the moment. So identifying those future focused skills for that business and putting in place programs to get ahead of it and allowing existing employees to build those skills so they can move when the jobs and the focus moves is really, really important. Where do we find, or how do we determine and prioritize those skills? Well, it's a constant back and forth with the business leaders, being part of the business strategy. And using also, I think what's become very helpful is using the data from the talent intelligence or skills management systems, if you're lucky enough to have one, where you have definitions and assessments of current skills. You can, and plus it's pulling in labor market data and future skills. You can see where the gaps are, where you have pockets, and where you might want to invest in the skills or in the groups of employees who will need particular skills. I think labor market trends are giving us early warnings as well on potential skill shortages. So HR teams and learning teams are really using a lot of different sources of data to identify the most critical future skills. And it's not that hard in a way. I think everybody at the moment and all corporate learning is focused on AI skills for everybody, and then getting very specific about the AI specialist skills that are needed for different roles.
So no, I love that. And outside of AI skills, I mean, you obviously through your work and through your network, right? You speak with CLOs all the time. You have a broad range of different organizations that you speak to and work with. Are there commonalities in terms of some of the in-demand skills that you hear about or hear your peers or the industry talking about, Brenda?
Absolutely. And maybe let's start with the technical. And it's not just within companies. I think the World Economic Forum and even your own Udemy Skills Trends report have been predicting recently huge demand, continued demand for IT and data skills, AI skills, cybersecurity, and very short supply. And then I think within sectors, you're seeing a lot of shortages too. For example, in healthcare, there's blooming shortages of all kinds of skills there. Also, I think when we think about leading in this, fast-paced, uncertain times, I think the type of leadership skills such as agility, critical thinking, making decisions with less information, all of that is becoming really important too. And you might say, well, how do you give practice in that? Well, I think you put people in scenarios, future scenarios. You ask them to make decisions. There may not be right and wrong answers even now, but simply putting your brain through the rigor of thinking about those future scenarios and how you might make decisions to give yourself as much optionality in the future to continue to make better and better decisions is really important. And another, I think, point about training critical thinking, creative thinking, is that it's not done in a vacuum. All the research on um, how the most creative people become that way, it's also based on a store of domain knowledge. So while you can have some rules of thumb or strategies for thinking critically, like asking better questions, etc., there's no substitute, I think, for expertise in a domain and bringing in experts to really help you solve specific problems.
Couldn't agree more. And you've mentioned something there that just sparked another question for me. You talked about, there's all of these new emerging skills that organizations need to build. And I think a lot of organizations are thinking through, do we try to build these skill sets internally or do we go external and hire to fill the skills gaps that may be emerging because of changes in the kind of economy or the global workforce? Do you have a perspective on how organizations should balance reskilling of existing talent versus hiring externally to bring talent in?
Well, I think it's always going to be a combination, and it's going to depend on your workforce planning and what you need. If you don't have enough internal people with the skills, you're going to have to look externally. But what if they're not even available externally? I think in addition to the hiring and the reskilling and continual skilling, there's also the idea of hiring vendors and consultants and experts on temporary assignments to get you through certain periods as well, or to help you set up processes that then your internal employees can follow. I think workforce planning, there's going to be no substitute for that. My bias is towards reskilling because I think you cannot rely on the external market. And if you have invested already in your employees and they are good performers, it is easier to retrain them. And also it creates a sense of loyalty, increases their engagement, and they actually see that you are investing in their future careers, not just in skills that are going to make the business more money.
Yeah, and so many benefits for the organization also in terms of keeping tacit knowledge inside the business, the loyalty that you mentioned. There's cost savings involved there. So yeah, couldn't agree more. Brenda, that was the conclusion of our questions around the future of AI. But I do have a couple of questions because we have you as a captive industry expert, and so we'd love for you to share with the watchers today about what your number one tip would be when embarking on a new learning project.
Well, I think it's common sense in a way, but clearly defining the end product and working backwards. And, like I said earlier, designing the activities first, rather than designing all the great presentations and information. Design the activities first. I also, in when I've been running learning teams, I've always said, let's see what we already have. Let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's try to reuse as much as possible. That can be formats, content, systems. Let's leverage content from the external world as well, and not try to build everything from scratch or even build it ourselves.
Make life easy where it makes sense. I love that. What about you now? I know you are a lifelong learner, you're always learning. What is your favorite learning or productivity hack?
Well, this might sound strange, but if I have to do something new or challenging, I know that I can't do it on the back of an envelope. I can't do it, in between calls or in between checking social media. So I actually try to carve out focused time when I have to do something important. Even preparing for this interview, Quiva, I focused, or I gave myself some focused time, and I tried to get into a state of flow, what they call flow, where I'm immersed. And then I can feel confident, actually, that I have mined the depths of my own knowledge and also consulted with, let's face it, my AI agents and um, GPTs to get more ideas, and then finally hone it down to something that I'm ready to present, whether it's a solution to a problem or an answer to a question. So I like to focus.
Love that. Brenda, thank you so much for being with us and participating in the interview today. Wonderful to learn from your insights and wisdom and many years of experience. And also kind of exciting, right? Like you mentioned earlier that organizations are going through a big period of transformation. And it sounds like the corporate learning and development space is also going through a big period of transformation. And there is so much opportunity and optimism for what's possible ahead. So yeah, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Quiva. Thanks for having me.